Michael, what the heck is a Super Beetle?
It's just like a regular Beetle, but it's super.
There seems to be some confusion about whether Felix here is a standard Beetle or a Super Beetle. We're here to tell you that it absolutely is a Super Beetle, and here's why. Alright, so obviously we're not experts like Heidi and Franny or our friend Eddie from Painter's Grinding, but we have been doing our research to find out exactly what makes a Super Beetle so super.
Yeah, you know we're not experts because Michael's wearing his red shoes and we're in Colorado. Who wears red shoes in Colorado, Michael?
We're in Boulder, it's fine.
Now the Super Beetle obviously looks a lot like a Beetle. You still have these really rounded bulbous fenders, you still have the running boards, you still have the scalloped hood that slopes down in the front, but if you put them side by side, they actually look pretty darn different.
The biggest difference visually between a Super Beetle like Felix and a standard Beetle is actually the size. So Felix here is about 3.2 inches longer than a standard Beetle and 1.4 inches wider than a standard Beetle. Plus, because of all that extra sheet metal, it weighs about 100 pounds more.
Now one way you can easily tell a Super Beetle from a standard Beetle is right down here. It's these vents. These are vents for the optional air conditioning system found on the Super Beetle.
It's a common misconception that all Super Beetles have a curved windshield, but actually for the first 2 years of production, 1971 and 1972, the Super Beetle had a flat windshield just like the standard Bug. However, in 1973, Volkswagen decided that they wanted to further differentiate the styling of the Super Beetle from the standard Beetle, so they gave it a curved windshield and a flatter roof.
The Super Beetle exists because back in the 1950s and 60s, at least here in the United States, if you wanted a small car, the Beetle was pretty much it. The domestics didn't make anything that competed with size, price, or really efficiency. So the Volkswagen owned the market. But in the 1960s, with the emergence of Japanese competitors, other European competitors, and then into the 70s, with the beginning of the fuel crisis and rising fuel costs, Volkswagen was losing sales left and right. I'll give you an example. In the late 1960s, Volkswagen's profits were 330 million Deutschmarks. By 1971, those profits had dropped to just 12 million Deutschmarks. With vehicles like the Chevy Vega, Ford Pinto, and Toyota Corolla quickly becoming more popular, Volkswagen was in trouble as these vehicles had larger trunks and in a lot of ways, better ride and handling.
The Super Beetle was designed with two things in mind, a bigger trunk and a better ride. This is how they did it. To fix the ride on the Beetle, Volkswagen upgraded the suspension in the front to a Mcpherson strut system, which greatly improved ride and handling. Fortunately, this also cleared up a lot of space in the front trunk, and therefore create actually 43% more storage space, an additional 3 cubic feet.
Interesting for me personally, I dailied one of these cars back in the day for several years. Had all sorts of interesting adventures in the car. Even had a car fire, all sorts of fun things. I'll have to tell you guys all about it. So it was, so this is really an emotional thing for me as well. Really enjoy this.
What color was yours, remember?
It was this color.
Was it really?
Yeah, it was.
Oh,
it was
very
almost
good.
a beige-ish color. So this is just really wonderful. It really is a trip down memory lane.
See what we're dealing with. Can you get under here, Michael?
Yeah, why not?
So this is nice. Somebody didn't remove all these caps and put weird nuts, and that's all original. It's very nice.
Yeah, we actually just did the oil change.
Did you? Okay.
And it's crazy. Trying to get this thing to seal, though, is a nightmare.
It is. It's very difficult.
So, 4-wheel drums, right? So we have rear drum brakes.
Yep. Uh-huh.
And then do these, I assume these boots go eventually and they start to crack?
I guess so. Yeah, they look like they're in good shape. They're nice and soft.
And I was reading it's really easy to like pull an engine on a Volkswagen.
Yes, it can. I can pull the engine on that car in 15 minutes.
Oh my
This
God.
one would be more like 25.
Whoa,
So, yeah, not bad at all.
25 minutes.
Yeah, well, you know. Your shocks are a bit old.
Okay.
There's a little rust down here, but I'm sure they're fine. We can check that later.
Yeah.
Another thing I'm not seeing under here is a ton of rust.
this is like the Mcpherson front suspension design, right? So this is different on a Super Beetle.
It's completely different. One of the reasons was, well, it's a little bit better than the torsion bars, I think, and also opened up the front trunk quite a bit, so you've got a lot more room up there. The steering is a little more robust on these cars as well, and much less maintenance on the front end.
Interesting.
The older cars had tons of grease zerks everywhere, and if you didn't maintain it, then all the parts would wear out, and then it would get very loose and wobbly.
Right.
Whereas this doesn't quite have that. Now the downside is, we replace the shock on the car, you've got to pull the towers out just like you would on a modern car, collapse the spring, put the new shock in it, and then go ahead and put it all back together. That's the only downside, I think.
So it's a little bit of a job to do the front shocks,
Yeah, not the end of the world.
This is perhaps the single easiest way to identify a Super from a standard Beetle. Right here in the standard Beetle, the spare tire sits bolt upright. In the Super, it lives under this flat load floor. The other easy but somewhat obscure way to tell a Super Beetle apart is right here. That's with the Washer Reservoir. In a standard Beetle, this reservoir actually lives within the spare tire. And take a look at this. This load floor is so flat, there's so much room in here, you can easily lay down or sit down in the trunk of the Super Beetle.
Possibly the biggest misconception about the Super Beetle is that it had a bigger, more powerful engine than the standard Beetle. This is not true. Our Felix here has the same 1600cc carbureted engine that all standard Beetles have, at least in 1971. We actually just replaced the chrome exhaust tips on Felix here. To check out that video, click the link above.
So the trunk's bigger, it's got independent front suspension, it's a little bit longer, a little bit wider. So what? What does that mean for the actual bodywork? Well, it means a lot actually. Here in the front end, the front fenders are completely different than the standard Beetle. So is the hood, so is the front apron. It really is like a completely new vehicle from the windshield forward.
On the road here, the Super Beetle is actually kind of a peach. The Mcpherson strut suspension really smooths out the ride. The wider track and longer wheelbase also help to make it a really pleasant thing to drive.
Super Beetles were very unique because Volkswagen designed the Super Beetle to have more space. You know, before you had a gas tank right over here and you were really limited on your space. Now the gas tank is right below the cowl here, so they give you more luggage room. And it's a more comfortable car. It had Mcpherson struts. If you push down on it, very soft.
Right.
Whereas the Bean car, you push down and it's a little tough to deal with. But Super Beetles are known for a lot of people either love the Super Beetle or hate them.
Right.
They're a great highway car. They're a good road car.
But they're worth a lot less than a standard Beetle.
Yeah, they are, and I think part of that is down to the fact people want the classic, they want the original, they don't want another version of the original.
To show you what we mean about value differences between the Super Beetle and the standard Beetle, we've consulted the help of our friends here at Haggerty. So I've looked up the average pricing on a 71 Super Beetle and a 71 standard Beetle to see how they compare. Now the average price for a 71 Super Beetle, according to Haggerty, is about $7,000, but if you change that to a standard Beetle, the value goes up by about $1,500 for an average price of $8,500. That's the kind of difference you see between a standard Beetle and a Super Beetle. You know, Tommy, when the Super Beetle came out, Volkswagen actually used it as a good excuse to make the standard Beetle less expensive. They discounted it.
Did they really?
Yeah. If you're buying a Beetle to drive it, I would argue that the Super Beetle is actually the one to get.
Yeah, and like we said, we talked to Eddie at Painter's Grinding. He's the expert. We've talked to other Beetle experts in the past, and they all say that Super Beetles drive better than standard Beetles. They're more comfortable, they've got a wider front track, so they're more stable. And if you get an early one like this, you still have the flat windshield, you still have the classic style steering wheel.
Yeah.
So it's not a bad way to go.
Yeah, and actually that makes sense, right? Because half the point of the Super Beetle was to make a more comfortable car for the American consumer.
More comfortable, more usable, more Japanese beatable.
Yeah, exactly. Those are basically the major differences between the standard Beetle and the Super Beetle, which just about does it for this episode of the Beetle Diaries. Be sure to come back every Sunday for a new episode of the Beetle Diaries, because we have a whole lot more planned for this little Beetle. For the Fastlane Car, I'm Michael Curtis with Tommy Micah. Thank you so much for watching. Please be sure to come back to TFLcar.com for more news, views, and real-world Super Beetle Diary reviews just like this one. Thanks.
We've got some traffic coming up.
Ooh,
and Super Beetles are longer, they're wider, they're fatter, but watch this. They actually have a better turning circle than a standard Beetle.
Wow, look at that. Better by actually about 4 feet.